It was really nice. Now let's introduce the next guest.
So I like inviting Yukti to come on the stage.
Yes, ma'am. Our next speaker is Muskan Mangla, a cybersecurity analyst at Mahindra Defence Systems Limited. She is a senior architect with experience in leading security solutions and controls embedded into critical platforms and applications. She also worked and leads central teams responsible for infrastructure and application security, specifically managing identity and access for the whole user base for enterprise and customer-facing applications. Her industry experience comprises of a broad range of industries, including financial service sector, ITS, pharmaceutical sector, and insurance sector. So with warm welcome, I request her to please take the stage.
Thanks a lot, Yukti, for such a kind introduction about myself. Let me quickly present my screen. Let me know when it is visible.
We are able
So,
to.
yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Dhaval sir, for giving me such a great opportunity. And I would like to speak today on the topic of types of authentication. So let's quickly start with the presentation part. So I would like to introduce myself again. I am certified ethical hacker. I am pursuing AWS Cloud Practitioner exam as of now, and I have received multiple Hall of Fames through Vulnerability Disclosure Program. At day, I am an information security consultant. I am volunteering or contributing in multiple infosec communities at night, and also a CTF player. Learn to hack the application hosted on premises or cloud and secure the technology. Thank you everyone for joining in here once again. So today's agenda is what is authentication, types of authentication, and then at the last I would be talking about the recommendation or best practices to be followed. Then post that we will be taking any queries if you have. So basically, what is authentication? So it is. So it states that any or confirming any user identification, so that users have the level of permissions to access or perform a task they are trying to do. Okay, and sometimes organization thinks like there is only one approach, which is password-based authentication, but it is not like that. We have multiple authentication mechanism. We will be talking about in today's talk. And why is user authentication important? To avoid unauthorized access. For example, user A only has access to relevant information and cannot see the sensitive information of user B. So that's why user authentication is very important, and it is a backbone of cybersecurity. So this is a pictorial representation of 5 common types of authentication. So token-based, session-based, multi-factor, and certificate-based, password-based. So let's take one by one. Firstly, I'll be talking about password-based authentication. So it is a very common and most used method of authentication. It can be in form of strings of letters, numbers, special characters. And if you have to protect yourself, you have to create strong password. So that any attacker cannot eavesdrop the password traffic. So now let's talk about the flow of password-based authentication. So if you see here in the picture, like in step 1, client tries to access some protected URL, which means that browser is hitting through our browser, we are hitting any resource to a server. And in the step 2, what would server do? Server will check whether the request has valid username and password or not under the authorization header. If yes, then server will prompt you 200 OK, which is a successful message. That means that you are authenticated. If not, if in the case of credential doesn't exist or invalid, it will prompt you for 401 unauthorized, which means that you have to provide the credentials again or input the credentials again. Then user will submit the credentials again and encode the password using any encryption, and then server will check the credentials. The cycle continues. If if the provided credentials are valid, you will be authenticated. And also, please make sure that this basic authentication is not considered secure unless and until you are not using TLS/HTTPS, because any attacker can eavesdrop your traffic and decode the credentials. So secondly, we'll be talking about multi-factor authentication. So basically, it means that the use of two or more separate security factors to confirm a user's identity. So here we have three types of factors to choose from. So first is something the user knows, like password or PIN. Secondly, something the user has, such as mobile device or a code sent to you. Third is something the user is, such as biometric. So this is a small representation of how it works. Under the first factor, if a user has requested to access the resource through the first factor, it will check the context. Okay, if yes, then request will be approved. If no, then it will go to another second factor. If the second factor is okay, then the request will be approved. If no, then request will be denied. You have to go to this cycle again to access the resource. And then thirdly, we'll be talking about session-based authentication. So why we use session-based authentication? Firstly, I'll be talking about this. Since HTTP is stateless, which means that every request is unaware of any action taken previously. So that is why we use session or token-based authentication to remember the last request sent. And what is it? So it is that in which the user's state is stored on the server's memory, and when we are using this authentication system, the server creates and stores the session data in the server memory, and when the user logs in, then it stores the session ID in a cookie or on the user browser, which means local storage. And common flaws of session-based authentication are session hijacking or CSRF attacks, which is cross-site request forgery, which means that a request can be changed or modified, and an attacker can perform a malicious action. So we have to let's see how it works. And basically, in step 1, client will send the login request, and browser will hit the request to server with a URL and along with the username and password. Server validates those credentials and creates a session and stores it in a memory. And again, server will assign that session ID to a current user and return back the generated session ID. Session ID means that some random unique identifier to identify the user, and it is a unique. So server stores now a generated session ID in memory. This could be anywhere, in your file system, in your database, anywhere. So in the step 3, client receives the session ID and stores it in a cookie, which means the client is receiving the server has sent the session ID to the client. It receives it and stores it in a local storage. Now, what will happen in step 4? Client sends next request with a session ID, and server will check that this exists user with the current session ID in its storage or not. If yes, if server has that session ID, if yes, then server will prompt you 200 OK, you are authenticated. If not, it will prompt you invalid session ID or 401 unauthorized. Also, like whenever user logs out, the session is destroyed or removed, and it cannot be reused. So token-based authentication, which is a fourth authentication type. Session-based authentication and token-based authentication are more or less the same. The only difference is that under the token-based authentication, the token is stored at the client level, not at the server level. And also the token-based authentication, for example, JWT token, it has authorization token, which is separated by 3 dots. Its format is separated by 3 dots, which means that it contains header, payloads, and signature. an example is shown here. For example, this EY, if you see here very carefully, it is separated by 3 dots, which means the first one is header, payloads, and the third one is signature. So characteristics of token. So it is a random looking string and server never stores it, hence it is stateless. It has an expiry after which we cannot use it, and also it is signed with a secret. So basically it is very difficult or identify to tamper. So it can be trusted by the server, and it is sent normally in the authorization header. So it has a similar way of how it works, like session-based authentication. Still, I would like to make it understand that client sends the login credentials to server along with username and password, and server will generate JWT from user data, okay, which contains header, payloads, and signature. Then it sends back again to client, and client will save that token on the local storage. Then again, client will request the user profile, okay, along with the authorization header, which means that it will contain JWT token. Then a server will validate that token, and if it is validated, it will send user profile on success, which is 200 OK. And common flaws of JWT token, using JWT token, is that if signature is made to none, or it is not used, a signature is not used, then it can be attackable. Last but not least, I would like to talk about certificate based authentication. So here it clearly states that we are using digital certificate to authenticate user, which means your client, between the client and web server, there is digital certificate being used, and it contains the certificate authority as well. Okay, so it will be more clear when when we will be talking about how it works. So this is the representation of how it works. So basically here, under the first step, browser requests the secure pages from web server. And in the step 2, for example, any browser, your Yahoo, Chrome, Firefox, sends its public key with its SSL certificate, which is digitally signed by third party or certificate authority. Under the step 3, once my browser gets the certificate, it will check the issuer's digital signature to make sure that the certificate is valid or it is legit or not. Then after the step 3, once the digital signature verified, it means that the web server's public key belongs to that particular server, not someone else. Now under the step 5, here we have to share a secret between a client and web server. So browser creates a symmetric key or a shared secret, and browser will keep that secret key and will share that key to web server, one copy to web server. However, my browser does not want to share the secret in plain text. So for that, we will use it uses the web server public key to encrypt the secret and then sends it to the web server. And then lastly, web server receives the symmetric encrypted key and it uses the private key to decrypt it. So now web server gets the browser shared key. Now the client and server can communicate in an encrypted way very easily, and which means in a secure way. Okay, so best practices to be followed, like I have talked about, it is like, firstly, you have to update your software or patch your software fully up to date. Secondly, ensure endpoint protection. And thirdly, install a firewall. Fourth is that you have to correct vulnerabilities to prevent future breaches. Here it contains, you have to encrypt everything. Second, it is like you have to improve your authentication and access management. Also, you have to hack yourself to anticipate future attacks, which means that you have to conduct vulnerability assessment and penetration testing timely or quarterly. So, and lastly, it is like you have to strengthen your weakest link. or humans, which is related to humans, which means that you have to conduct the policies and review the policies, and policies should be in place, and so you have to spread the awareness, security awareness amongst the organization or employees. So yeah, that is it from my end. Any queries? Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Muskan. It was a wonderful, presentation. Your accumulation of different authentication techniques, how different options work. You very nicely put forward. So I think anybody who has been listening to this session would at least gain the basic idea about what authentication is actually. When we talk about multi-factor, when we talk about certificate-based authentication, this gives them, and primarily, they make them aware, because when we talk about these topics among the security arena, is always the infosec people, they would say, yeah, this is all very simple, I know all the time. But when we talk to the business, it's very important to explain the business, at least the basics of, securing the workflows, basic of securing the data. And here you rightly pointed out that, yeah, this is the different, aspect should be taken care of. So your presentation is gonna give a lot of information to the founders, to the startup entrepreneurs about the security aspect. Now, one thing I liked in particular about one of the last slide where you mentioned about how to prevent the human mistakes, considering the human factor is the biggest challenge in the cybersecurity today. And we at Rainbow Secure also give it an utmost importance to it. So anybody want to learn more about how Rainbow Secure helps and helps mitigate the threats from human factor and how it makes it a powered factor, we can have a separate conversation. And while we are at here, I would like to point out that anybody interested to do further research, further practical implementation of your different authentication techniques, they can come to us. We can guide them. We can give them a lab environment. If you are building a project and you're struggling to secure your solutions, come to us. We'll have a partners within our team, and our security solutions partner. They will help you deploy your solution and guard it with effective guardrails. So thank you very much, Muskan. It was a very nice way to handle everything in one talk. You did a great job.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, sir, for your kind words. And also, yes, you're right in saying so that Rainbow Secure provides and facilitates a good security push in terms of authentication. Yes, and provides a user-based experience in a great way.
Yeah. Now let me see if anybody on the chat. Otherwise, I will have some.
Sure.
Mr. C or Eva, anybody have any questions for Muskan? Anybody in the attendance? Sandeep, Yukti, Ansika?
Okay.
I guess I
We'll
can, have
Yeah.
one follow-up question for you. So I would like to know what would be, as a developer, as a security professional, what would you need to further advance your career goals? What support you would expect from, technology company like us? What kind of support we can give you so that you can learn more things, and you can maybe collaborate or team up with your friends and continue your education, because it's one thing to learn theory in college, but when you are in products environment, what journey you went through, you think that the students who are currently in the MTech or BTech final years can take advantage of and learn more?
So yeah, sir, I would like to provide an answer for the same. So firstly, research, and secondly, practice. These two things I would expect from any tech companies or any communities. Research means that, like for example, today's topic was authentication types. you already know that authentication is endless topic, endless discussion. So as much as research we can do and provide our insights for the same is a much better way we can you cope up with this subject. And secondly, practice means in a practical way. So we have to be very practical in terms of our attacks and in terms of like how to mitigate those attacks if any incident occurs. So these things we have to keep in our mind, and we can, in this way we can secure our technology, our people, and our world. That's all.
Right, yeah, rightly said that, yes. And other thing that comes to my mind is that any developer or any IAM, configuration expert should also team up with the pen testers, and also, they can take help of actually them in a constructive way. That when you are deploying something, when you are developing your product and solution, it's one thing to deploy the authentication techniques, but it's other thing to also test out your workflows to make sure that you're not leaving behind any loophole or backdoor in your implementation. Because no matter how good tools you use, but you leave behind a certain door, and that will be a very much a contra to the overall essence and theme of the security implementation. So I think it's a collaborative effort of dev team, IAM people, and the pen testing team or resources, both internal and external to the organizations, that they help you validate your implementation and they help you refine your implementation. And as we learned in the earlier talk from Viraj, that it's an ongoing process, right? When you deploy your solutions, when it pass your security review, you have to actually have a continued assessment of the environment, continued review when you push new versions, new updates to your products. So that was the very much good learning jam from Viraj's talk. And with your talk, you listed out all the options. So now I would like to add here that these options are available for tackling different security challenges for different business scenarios. So we would call it a balanced security friction that would help business achieve the right security without stressing out the users or the employees. Because tons of security options and methods are available, to invoke and deploy certain option at a right time is the key. Whether you're talking about a geographical access control lock, or you're talking about a multi-tier security like Rainbow password authentication, or a passwordless zero trust logins that we offer, is always a choice, and it's always a proper configuration of your workflow and IAM settings that has to be invoked. And I think your talk is going to be a good learning platform for both founder side and for the our students in the technology field. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
ma'am.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Muskan.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so now, Nihal, you can guide us to the networking.
So we don't keep you further waiting. Instead of waiting, let's meet in a lounge where we have a table and also a one-on-one networking session. So if you like to join there, please join us in a networking lounge where we have a separate assigned table where we meet the one-on-one. Okay, thank you. Bye.
And thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, today's speakers. Take care.
Take care. Bye, Muskan.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Bye bye.